ye rivers and holy. Glory, glory, glory to the Father for making you a nation, a joy forevermore. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall hear it meet in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall hear it meet in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation.
Hello, everyone. You're welcome to the JMA Connections on this Thursday, the 16th day of July 2026. I'm delighted to be once more on this platform today so that we'll discuss two very interesting issues. First, I'd like us to, talk about a new phenomenon, a very interesting one, what I will call the Longue Longue phenomenon. And I'm using the Longue Longue phenomenon to point out something to the people of the Southern Cameroons as a trend that has gone on for just so long in La République du Cameroun. My dear people, I'd like us to notice that for 65 years and counting, we have been dealing with a system that doesn't believe in bending, dealing with a system that doesn't believe in paying attention to the greater worries of the people, dealing with a system that believes more in imposing its will and in deifying the personalities that make up its system. You will notice that what is happening right now with Longue Longue is something that has happened for so long. It has happened even in our community. Because you notice that Longue Longue, the musician, the artist, that at some point positioned himself as saying that he was the defender of the freedoms of the people, that he was that one who will stand and take all the bullets for the people. And of course, he sang very courageous songs, some even against France, the colonial master. Although, when things got so rough, he didn't hesitate to find himself running back to the same France. Of course, Longue Longue had been framed before in France. And anyone who listened to the earlier releases of Longue Longue would have understood that the French would not tolerate that. When Longue Longue came out with his piece, where he said every wonderful thing, every good thing in the country, be it the natural resources like forests and all whatnot, or beautiful neighborhoods where people will stay, or major contracts or everything was belonged to the French and nothing to the people. And when he said Longue Longue was this, Longue Longue was that, you would definitely have understood that he put the French on his back. And of course, when Longue Longue went to France the first time, and he was set up with claims that he had, sexually assaulted some little girl, it was simply an attempt. Of course, it was a very well-knitted plan to make sure that they will hold something on his head, like a sword of Damocles, to ensure that at every given moment, they could cause him to bend to their will. Longue Longue eventually returned to Cameroon. When he returned to Cameroon, he thought that because he was back at base, he could continue to flex his muscles. But things came so bad, and we saw Longue Longue kneeling with Jene Gento having his hand on Longue Longue's head and asking Longue Longue to beg for pardon from the bias system and to apologize that he will never ever sing anything again that will be against the personality of Mr. Paul Biya, no matter what he does. Oh my goodness, we could even see Longue Longue crying and begging and everything. And that was because Longue Longue had been very vocal against the regime and wanted to travel out of the country. He was held at the airport and his passport was taken. So Longue Longue went through that cycle of begging, of pleading, and of, taking public humiliation, going down to his knees. And of course, finally, the system, knowing that they had broken him completely and the weakened Longue Longue, they released his passport. Now he traveled. Longue Longue went back to France. When Longue Longue went back to France, something happened. A video emerged in which Longue Longue was being seriously tortured. And this whole session was led by a military man called Tabali from the southern Cameroons, from Mezam County, specifically Santa local government area. Tabali and his boys gave Longue Longue sound torture in that video. I mean, everyone was horrified. The level of indignation was beyond imagination, not only within Cameroon, but across borders. And Longue Longue seized on this. He seized on this, of course, for good reason, to castigate the system, to castigate the BIA system again beyond imagination. And he was now very hopeful that with that video evidence in hand, it was going to be easy for him to gain asylums in France. I think Longue Longue was naive enough to forget that he had an antecedent in France and that they had gone after him before on charges of sexual assault on a minor. Longue Longue definitely forgot that the French were always still ready to get their pound of flesh on him. If he had sound advisors around him, Longue Longue would have been told that the best thing to do would have gone to some other country to seek asylum. But hell no. He felt very comfortable in France and was so comforted with that particular piece of video evidence that went viral on social media. And he was convinced that with that, there was no way he would be denied asylum. Little did he know that the Cameroon government, that the CPDM grinding mill was going to move into action with France and to get Longue Longue pinned to a place where he won't move, where he will find himself once more at the mercy of the same system he had dared to insult and to publicly deride a second time, and this time with so much enthusiasm. People always forget. The BIA system doesn't just pick you and humiliate you. Doesn't just pick you and kill you or throw you in jail. Depending on who you are, the caliber and the weight that you carry, the system always has something else that you will do for them. They have something else that you do for them. You know? So, when they worked with France, and the CPDM parliamentarian, Madame Nyanga, call Madame Nyanga, while Longue Longue was going through his difficult moments in France, she visited Paris. So, government sources, some very trusted voices say, the purpose of her visit was simply to make sure that the French will remain, focused on their position and will not move a second when it comes to handling the situation with Longue Longue. With assurances that, no, don't bother. He is claiming that something will happen to him. We are giving you assurances. Let him go. Nothing will happen to him when he comes back home. We will ensure that he will stay free, but he will be back home. And so they put in the pressure that they needed to put in to make sure that Longue Longue will be, released to them at his most vulnerable ebb. Because at this point in time, at this very critical moment in the political history of La République du Cameroun, when the BIA system is in its, in its last days and, the most critical of its days, with a power transition in limbo, and with all kinds of attacks coming from all angles, Longue Longue will be a vital tool, a very vital tool, a marionette. Because becoming a marionette in the hands of the CPDM, oh my goodness, Longue Longue could be very lethal in doing the regime's dirty job. After all, he has no other options. After all, his existence, his freedom, and his ability to move around freely now depends on them. He is at the mercy of the BR system. So, of course, they succeeded. When Longue Longue was placed on deportation plane, the same Mami Nyanga who had traveled to France to make sure that the French government would not shift their position, that the French legal system would not shift their position on Longue Longue, was on hand to receive Longue Longue at the airport. Of course, he was briefly detained just to remind him that this is what will happen if you don't cooperate. He was briefly detained and then eventually released to Nyanga, to Mami Nyanga, who went in and, decided to bail him, So Longue Longue knows that the freedom he has is conditional freedom. It's not unconditional freedom. It's conditional freedom. And so he must cooperate. And then at the same time, they started treating him like a hero who had just come back home. But this time, no longer a hero for the people. No longer a hero for the masses. No longer that one who will be the voice of the voiceless. But this time, as a marionette in the hands of the system. And so, therefore, they have now moved to the next stage. So Longue Longue now has a clear role. First, he started with Maurice Kamto. Next, he will move to Issa Chiroma Bakari. So Longue Longue now is effectively a marionette in the hands of the BIA system that they will use to any angle they want. So you already got his massive criticism of Maurice Kamto. The same Maurice Kamto that Longue Longue supported while he was in France. The same Maurice Kamto that Longue Longue has thrown his weight behind. You are going to hear him in the days ahead telling Issa Chiroma Bakari not even to come close, to make sure he keeps his disorder very far and all of those things, and will be assuring the people that the only way the country will survive will be a perpetuation of the BIA system. That is how the BIA system operates. Now over to the Southern Cameroons. You recall the young man who, in a video that went viral, that was on Press R on CRTV, who was telling Professor Elvis Ngole Ngole, "Oh, Prof, just stop supporting evil. I can bring my report cards. All of us have done it. Stop supporting evil," and all of this. You recall that gentleman? I don't know. I would like to encourage that Killian Ndefon and all of the presenters of Press R to bring him back to Press R, because now he's a changed man. His language is completely different, totally different. If you hear him talk now, oh my goodness, I think he may even be looking for an opportunity to sleep on the ground and roll for Professor Elvis Ngole Ngole to, forgive him for making the statements he made. Because effectively, he has also been caught into the system, caught up by the system, and is also having his way. So this is exactly how a gangsteric system operates. This is exactly how a rogue state operates. And this is exactly what they are doing to some of our people who yesterday were very militant. I mean militant against the colonial presence of La République du Cameroun in our territory, and have turned today and are telling us that vying for, absolute independence, total freedom, total self-determination is the worst possible thing ever to do. You recall Sofoncha? Sofoncha, yeah. The gentleman who was always posing with military Land Rovers and all of those things, and who at some point under Sako Samuel Ikome was the chairman or the joint chief of staff of how do they call the Ambazonia Self-Defense Council, the ASC. The very man who came and announced pompously and very strongly that they had captured the late mayor of Boya, Patrick Ekema. And you could see him, that man, when he spoke, you say this will be the very last person to ever turn against the Southern Cameroons. But today, so Foncha, when you watch him on social media, the only thing he's talking is Southwest speaking them. We no get for joining that thing. Southwest speaking them. No go tell that graphic people them. Say may they go stand very far. We Southwest speaking them. We no get for, oh my goodness. So you see the way he turned, the U-turn, because he was also flushed down the CPDM grinding mill. Not only him. You recall there was another one. They called him Good Santos. He was calling himself, he had given himself a name, the Ngambe man of the liberation movement. And he had grown in rank. He was even the State House press secretary. If you met him even, at the wake keep ceremony where he said, do you know me? I'm your State House press secretary. Because you shouldn't make a mistake not to know him, not to recognize him as such. He passed through Yaoundé. Of course, he was thrown into the CPDM grinding mill. And he said he went to attend the Grand National Dialogue and came away from there and was able to realize his American dream. He was able to buy his own house in America. After several years in America, he needed the Southern Cameroon's liberation cause. So this is how they operate. That is how that system operates. And that is why I've talked a lot of the time about the notion that that system uses poverty as a public policy. And you will be wondering, because public policy, the role, the objective of public policy is to fight poverty. But in Cameroon is the reverse. They rather take poverty as a policy which is enforced. That's why you find generalized hardship. And that's why the issue of so-called black legs all over the Southern Cameroons, will make a lot of sense. Because they reduce people to their barest expression. So that when they show you a 5,000 francs note, oh my goodness, you are ready to offer a head. To offer a human head, yes. You have heard ridiculous stories where people will say, oh, they gave him 2 bottles of beer and promised him 10,000 francs to go and show where freedom fighters were hiding, or to go and see if he could even, surprise them and then call. That you transform yourself into a human shield because of peanuts. That's what happens. So Longue Longue has already been flushed down the CPDM grinding mill. And so Longue Longue, as you knew him, is finished. Everything is finished. And so, while that one is happening, the issue of succession is at the center of every discussion in Yaoundé right now. Since Paul Biya left La République du Cameroun for Switzerland in Geneva, and they said it was a brief private stay, at some point the Minister of Communication said no, it was a brief working visit. And he was very busy. He was not in hospital doing things. He was doing things for the state. It's now at least 38 days. 38 days, So at least 5 weeks. That's 1 month and 1 week since Paul Biya left Cameroon. He's not going back. The signals that we're getting from internal sources are not good. The reports are that the state of Mr. Biya's health is not improving. It's rather deteriorating by the day. At the same time, the dignitaries in Yaoundé are doing everything to ensure that he should at least do one passage back home and be home even for 1 week before going back to Switzerland to continue his treatment, so that they could package him, pump steroids in him as usual, so he makes some triumphant return back home and emerges from the aircraft. Even if he will stand there for just 5 minutes and be seen. And then after about a week, he goes back to Switzerland to continue his treatment, so they could continue sending the people to sleep. And let people know, no, he is in very sound health. He is taking care of the statecraft. Everything is under control. He's managing the situation perfectly. But what is causing the CPDM to be on its toes right now is because they are seeing increasingly that discussions about power transition are likely to happen in spite of their involvement. Because first, do not forget, Frank Emmanuel Biya is not a member of any of the organs, any of the governing organs of the CPDM. And so, this concern has been raised. You recall in my last broadcast, I pointed out that although for a long time, Frank Emmanuel Biya has held the position of special advisor to the President of the Republic, appointed in a presidential decree that was never ever made public, he does not have a strong foothold in any sector of governance, making him effectively an inside outsider. And so this emergency meeting that has been summoned by the Secretary General of the CPDM Central Committee, involving leaders of key organs of the party from across the country, to be held next Wednesday, July 22, reverts a lot of importance, because I have been hinted that one of the key objectives of this meeting is to see how to bring Frank Emmanuel Biya at least into the Central Committee, to make him at least a member of the Central Committee, to begin from there. So you should watch out the outcome of that particular meeting, because Yaoundé today, as we're talking, they are living, they are eating, they are breathing now only the succession question. That is why the current agitations by Maurice Kamto have attracted the ire of the system. And that is also why they are determined they don't want to organize any new elections, any general elections, because what they saw at the last presidential elections demonstrated to the system beyond reasonable doubt that with general elections, it will be difficult for them to orchestrate the kind of banditry, the kind of electoral banditry that happened on the 12th of October 2025. And they're going to find it difficult to bar Maurice Kamto's party from participating at those elections. That's why they have taken a three-pronged approach against Maurice Kamto. Number one, they are trying to cause the party to implode from within by hanging on the notion that Maurice Kamto had resigned as chairman of the party when he decided to join Le Manidem, to become the candidate of Le Manidem at the last presidential election. And that according to the basic texts of the MRC party, if he returned to the party, he had to be a militant, a simple, a rank and file militant for at least 3 years before he could, attempt again to sail to the top of the party as its chairman. But that didn't happen. The people immediately found ways to get Maurice Kamto back to the helm. And so, Atanga Ponji and the Biya system are sponsoring a certain faction to, begin legal action against Maurice Kamto to invalidate his re-election to the helm of the MRC party. And the reaction of the MRC party has immediately been to radiate or to sack, to dismiss those particular militants from the MRC party. Do not forget, they had used this approach against the SDF when the system encouraged coyly the late barrister Ben Acho Muna to hold a rival SDF convention and of course to get right to the point of electing their own executive, to the point where they said, the SDF had been dissolved and the SDF was even being fused into some other, political party and all whatnot. Skirmishes that led to the death of an SDF militant known as Diboule in Yaoundé. And they used that death to create legal issues for Ni John Frundi. And they held that on Frundi's head as a sort of Damocles, so that at every given moment he knew they had to be grateful for the regime for not using that opportunity to throw him in jail. These are some of the things that you need to know about the kind of rogue system that we're dealing with. So Atanga Ponji is taking it from that angle. Mami Nyanga is using Longue Longue, Elindi Lobe, and others from the other side. So you have now all kinds of attacks at that end. And at the same time, they know that Issa Chiruma remains lethal. So they are also developing strategies at that end. But within the CPDM itself, that is where the biggest problem is. Because within the CPDM itself, there are at least 4 factions that are vying for that position of vice president and, of course, vying for that position of president of the republic. So how do they resolve this? And like I said, with Frank Bia's current status, he's an inside outsider. So this meeting of the Central Committee of the CPDM, convened for Wednesday, the 22nd of July, is extremely important. And the decisions that will come out of that meeting will be a pointer to exactly how this fight will continue. If they're able to agree, you recall the picture I showed yesterday in my video broadcast on the JMA Connections on the 15th of July 2026, where they put a picture of Frank Bia and you could see from their heads and all, so know that these are state dignitaries all bowing to him, where they say they have all agreed, and so a new government may soon come out. If at the level of the Central Committee, they come to a unique and agreeable position to call Frank Emmanuel Bia into the Central Committee, you know that they are trying to build some kind of consensus at some levels. So whatever will come out of that meeting will be a clear indication of how much internal divisions are being taken care of. So we need to pay very careful attention to this. And for my people of the Southern Cameroons, I say this. Don't deceive yourself that what is happening over there does not concern us. It does concern us every bit of it, every second of the way. So we must continue to pay very careful attention. And there's very interesting news. Some very interesting development out there in Switzerland regarding Atanga Ponji. And that will be the subject matter of our next discussion tomorrow, this Friday, the 17th of July, 2026. Until then, I'd like to thank all of you who were part of this live broadcast. And if this is your first visit, this is the first time you're visiting on the JMA Connections, I invite you to go right ahead and hit on that subscribe button. Make sure to personalize so that anytime something new drops here, you will be the first to know. And also, please share the link as much as possible. Let's reach as many people as possible with our message. And of course, do not forget to drop a like. And I'd like to read your comments in the comment section. Be part of the conversation, but avoid attacking personalities. Avoid being, nasty. Let's stay on the issues. Thank you very much for your very kind attention. To God be the glory.
Nos frères Ambazonia ont encore frappé fort. Voilà 2 soldats qui nous ont encore quittés. Mais mes frères militaires là, policiers là, vous défendez quoi dans le nozo? Vous cherchez quoi dans le nozo? On vous parle d'un peuple qui se bat pour sa liberté. Comme le peuple francophone n'a pas le courage de se battre, comme nos frères du Nord sont en train de se battre. Vous partez tout le temps là-bas. Vous endeuillez vos familles par rapport à quoi? Pourquoi? Pour ça, voilà Judith Rachida, PDG de Camtel, en train de faroter l'argent. Quand vous vous levez le matin, vous n'avez même pas de quoi manger. Vous vous levez le matin, vous n'avez pas de quoi boire. Vous n'avez pas la possibilité d'envoyer vos enfants à l'école. En 2025, on a volé vos élections. En 2018, on a volé vos élections. En 1992, on a volé vos élections. Un vieux père de 93 ans. Vous partez là-bas, vous daillez pour qui? Pourquoi? Voilà la plus grande tchélée du pays à qui on a en train de donner l'argent. Vous vous battez pour qui? Pourquoi? Les Ketia Koudé sont là-bas, mangent leur vie. Les Judith Rachida, PDG de Camtel, mangent leur vie. Tous les ministres sont là-bas, mangent leur vie. Vous gotez, vous daillez. Daillez même au moins pour la bonne cause. Ce n'est pas la secte pourquoi que vous êtes en train de combattre, les gars. Vous êtes en train de combattre vos propres frères, vos compatriotes. On ne vous a pas envoyé qu'il aime les terreaux. On vous a envoyé qu'il aime vos propres frères. Vous allez vous battre. Et tous les jours, vous daillez. Vous croyez que nous, on peut être contre nos frères Ambazonia quand ils gèrent les mouvements comme ça, là? Vous croyez que nous, on peut être contre eux? Regardez la dame-ci. Vous croyez que si la dame-ci avait son salaire normal à la fin du mois, Le PDG de Camtel est dans les 500, 600 000 francs CFA. Vous croyez qu'elle devait faroter l'argent comme ça? Les liasses de Didi Kolo. Vous êtes là, vous gotez là-bas. Parce que vos frères ont dit que non. La constitution de notre pays, on est une partie souveraine. On veut que les lois de notre pays soient les lois de notre pays. Paul Biafran, ses frères et Kambechi Kilo. Il envoie là-bas pour le commander, pour leur dire ce qu'ils ont fait. Alors que les traités du pays ne le permettent pas. Quand nos frères vous se lèvent, vous vous levez, on vous envoie avec le gun, le kill.
If you are asking my personal opinion to keep Cameroon one must be divisible. Because it's a cliche that Cameroon is one and indivisible. Because it's not true. Culturally we are divisible. Language-wise we are divisible. The law-wise we have inherited that. So anybody who says Cameroon is one and indivisible is a fallacy. And so we would have to handle that issue very squarely and objectively. And that's what...
Glory to the Father for making you a nation, a joy forevermore. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation.